I've gathered a few trauma bonds that you may have that were developed by how your parents treated you when you were younger. I'm just gonna jump straight into it because we have no time to be worried about offending anyone here. The first step to breaking the trauma you have and to adopt better habits is to witness them. Is to actually notice them and to catch them within yourself. Let's start with having a parent that denies your reality. This is where when you're a child, your feelings, what you think, what you experience is not valid. For example, you would share how you feel with your parents and they would belittle the significance of how you're feeling. They'll tell you, oh, that's fine, that's nothing. Or that's nothing compared to what I'm going through as the parent. For example, maybe you're uncomfortable with a relative and you tell your parents and you're met with a response like, oh, he's just trying to be nice, you better be polite. When a parent figure denies their child's reality and refuses to genuinely listen to their experiences, they're subconsciously teaching their child to reject their intuition, and therefore perhaps you don't trust your gut feeling. You will learn to distrust yourself. We will learn that our judgment cannot be trusted, and we will look to others to shape our reality. We'll look to others for advice and approval before we do something. A child might confide in their parents about problems like their friends refuse to sit with them during lunch. For the child in that moment, it's an extremely distressing situation because you're being rejected by the environment. The well-intentioned parent could respond with some degree of dismissal. Don't worry, you'll find new friends. It isn't a big deal, you know. You don't need them. Some parents will push the child to repress their feelings or ignore the feelings that are coming up. The child is having a legitimate feeling and is looking to be comforted and supported, and instead they were told that the pain is inconsequential and means nothing. This could lead to lost intuition and a lot of internal conflict, and you won't trust your own decisions. You won't trust yourself to do things. You will think that your judgment isn't very good and you will look for approval when you make decisions, and that could make you very dependent and emotionally unstable. Next is having a parent who does not see or hear you. These are parents who spend all their capacity on making sure basic survival needs are there and leave little energy and attention and capacity for emotional needs. Not being seen or heard is being emotionally disconnected from your parent figures. For example, your parents are overwhelmed by their own feelings and distracted by chronic stress. Or maybe your parents experienced complete emotional shutdown and is unable to listen to their child's needs and support their child's emotional expression. You won't feel acknowledged, and perhaps your parents are hopping from tasks to tasks and never properly listening to you, never genuinely listening to how you feel and supporting you through that, which very little parents even have the liberty to because they're struggling to make ends meet, or perhaps they're uneducated. This lack of acknowledgement can also take the form of your future being predetermined for you, your choices being made for you. This will make it hard for you to trust your inclinations and follow your intuitive needs. Third, having a parent live through you, make decisions for you perpetually, and tries to mold and shape you into something they want you to be. Maybe your parent pushes you to be something that you don't want to be, to fulfill their own passions. Perhaps you don't want to play piano, but your mom was a failed musician, so she wants you to become a professional pianist. These parent figures who live their life through their children carry a deep-seated painful belief that they are a failure themselves or in some way inadequate, so they project their need to redeem that failure through their child. The child may feel an oppressive need to succeed and abandons parts of their authentic self in order to please the parent figure. This leads to children having a lot of resentment since they neglected their own needs and wants to fulfill the needs and wants of their parents. Anytime an intrinsic need is denied, resentment soon follows. This loss of self can manifest in multiple ways in adulthood. You could be severely indecisive and procrastinate a lot, or you could go the other way and have an obsessive need to succeed. A parent living through their child can also take the form of when a parent figure consistently projects their needs and their own desires onto their child, such as telling their child to avoid certain friends or focus deliberately in certain classes in school. It could be something as subtle as telling a child that you're gonna be an amazing mother one day. This is a completely unconscious process. Parent figures who do this likely don't see any problem with it, and frankly it is almost unavoidable. When these children hit adulthood, some could struggle to cope with the misalignment of their careers, but the path that they took was kind of forced upon them. Some people could use substances, experience mental health issues, and in some cases commit suicide. Number 4. Having a parent who does not set boundaries. For example, you have a diary and your parent reads it. This violation of personal space, it often results in a confrontational shaming of the child for their thoughts, and sometimes even punishment based on what was read in the diary. I think this is one of the most common ones, where parents fail to see the importance of boundaries. They try to inject themselves into every decision you make and every friend you have and everything you do. You as the child could internalize a belief that such boundary crossing are a part of closeness and maybe even love. And from there, the relationships you make in the future will be painful and toxic. Either that or you will turn to becoming highly secretive and very protective with your personal details. You'll be afraid of opening up because you fear being shamed. Another common boundary crossing is when one parent complains about the other parent to their child. The parent figure might forget to acknowledge that the child is not a peer and may be seeking emotional comfort from their child. And it's easy as a child to feel overwhelmed by such personal details and have conflicted feelings about hearing negative things about their other parent figure. Number 5. A parent obsessed with how they appear and the image they portray. Perhaps they tell you to shut up if you call too much attention to yourself. Perhaps they're obsessed with how they look and always have to dress up really nicely or always have to put on a lot of makeup before they go outside. Or maybe the parent obsesses over the child looking presentable at all times, or makes comments about the child's weight. Maybe he's fat or he's skinny. This begins a lifelong practice of believing that receiving love is conditional based on how you appear. This can also be observed when a parent behaves differently outside versus at home. Perhaps your family members are constantly screaming and bickering at home, and once they're in public they speak lovingly and politely, and then the children will quickly learn that they have to shift and change who they are depending on where they are and who they talk to in order to survive and be loved. Number 6. This is something I personally struggled with: having parents who cannot regulate their emotions, which means inconsistent treatment and volatile emotional expression. Most of us have parent figures that struggle to identify or regulate their feelings. Instead, when they are emotionally flooded or experiencing many intense feelings at once, they will project those feelings outward, screaming, slamming doors, throwing things and then storming off. For some, the emotions are projected inwards, resulting in some kind of withdrawal. This looks something like parents giving the silent treatment. They become emotionally distant because they feel emotionally overwhelmed. The parent figure shuts down and shuts out their children. And maybe the rules they set for you are inconsistent based on how they feel. So maybe sometimes you can speak loudly at home, and sometimes when they're not feeling like it, you can't. And then because the rules are so inconsistent, you get scared, you get anxious, and something like that can blossom into you having some level of crippling anxiety because you're constantly treading, you're constantly careful about what you do because the rules are inconsistent. And when we have loved ones who shut down instead of managing their feelings, we are modeled an overall lack of emotional regulation, and from a young age we won't develop coping skills that enable us to build emotional resilience of our own. And the inconsistent treatment that will give you ambivalent attachment issues, that will give you a lot of anxiety. The most common ways we cope with these issues is people pleasing. Once you meet the demand, the stress is gone. Anger or rage. When you have someone to discharge your emotions on, you're gonna go ahead and do it. And dissociation. You kind of take your emotional attachment away from your body so that you don't experience the trauma. All of these coping strategies help us to delay immediate pain, to avoid repeating or reliving our past trauma, and they never help meet our spiritual, emotional, or physical needs. When our needs are constantly unmet, our pain and disconnection are compounded. Self-preservation leads to self-betrayal. This cycle of unsolved trauma, repetition of coping behaviors, and consistent denial of self will tear us apart. It allows the pain to live on within our mind and body. The first step to change is to identify your eccentricities, the decisions you make based on your trauma and your coping mechanisms. Why are you coping, and when do you cope? When do you dissociate? When do you start throwing a fit of rage? When do you start becoming a people pleaser? Things like that. And once you're able to catch them, you're able to catch when you are dissociating, or you're able to catch when you're intensely emotionally activated by little things, or things that you think seems little. When you identify when it happens, you identify the reason, you take your time, you sit and think about it, and then habitually, you build better habits. You stay conscious, stay mindful, and you deal with your issues from there. There's plenty of other ways like meditation and journaling that can help you with your mental health. I do feel like I'm obligated to mention, by no means am I encouraging you to blame your parents or be ungrateful. If you think trying to identify the roots of your problem, your bad relationship tendencies, makes you a scumbag, the truth is they probably have made you feel that way somehow. And there is nothing more important than the truth. I love my parents. I am infinitely grateful. I adore them. So grateful it cannot be quantified or described in simple adjectives. But that should not stop me from digging into myself and looking at the possibilities of cause, and knowing that there's a reason for the ways I act. Helps me love myself, helps me respect myself, helps me understand that I am not born a monster, or I am not born eternally confused. Parents are scientifically going to be largely involved in your relationship tendencies, and there is nothing wrong in that. If you do identify issues that stem from your parent figures, do note Literally every parent in the world is not taught to parent. Every parent is human and all humans have limited capacity. They prioritize certain things to keep you alive and perhaps couldn't afford to be always there for you emotionally. It is not your fault what happened to you, but it is your responsibility to learn and change, because that is what it means to live. To better world.